So our next topic for discussion is age and sex-related differences and their implications for resistance exercise. This module will focus on resistance training for women and older adults, a topic which has received increasing public and medical attention. Now, when designing and evaluating resistance training programs, strength and conditioning professionals need to understand age and sex-related differences in body composition, muscular performance, and trainability, as well as their implications for each individual. So I've acknowledged several times in this class that a limitation of resistance training research is that majority of it has focused on young, healthy men. So I did a recent PubMed search, typing in the keywords here, resistance training and resistance exercise and women and female. And you can see the number of publications from starting in 1990 all the way up into 2018. So it's really only been over the past 10 years or so where there's been a large increase in the number of studies examining female athletes and their responses and adaptations to resistance training. Now, it's well established that women who regularly participate in resistance training can improve their health, reduce their risk of degenerative diseases such as osteoporosis, as well as reduce their injury rates. Ultimately, we see an enhancement of their overall sport performance in those female athletes who participate in resistance training. Now, scientific evidence clearly indicates that women are capable of tolerating and adapting to the stresses of resistance exercise and that the benefits are substantial. Furthermore, to enhance health and fitness and reduce injury rates, it is now suggested that resistance training be an essential component of any training program that females follow. And these recommendations, these evidence-based recommendations are coming both from the American College of Sports Medicine as well as the National Strength and Conditioning Association. Now, sex-related differences in physique, body composition, and physiological responses to resistance exercise must be understood when designing and evaluating resistance training programs for females. So in terms of sex differences in body size and composition, nothing new here, but we know that compared to adult men, adult women typically have lower body mass, more body fat, and less muscle and bone mass. And adult men typically have broader shoulders compared to adult women, and by having broader shoulders in men, this can support more muscle tissue and also provide a mechanical advantage for muscles acting at the shoulder, such as presses. In terms of muscular strength, when we talk about absolute differences in muscular strength between the sexes, women generally have about 2/3 the absolute strength of men. However, if we look at relative strength between the sexes, comparing men and women, when those muscular strength is made relative to either fat-free mass or muscle cross-sectional area, then differences in strength between sexes are greatly reduced or entirely disappear. So this gets us to the statement here that muscle quality is not sex-specific. If we look at muscular power differences between the sexes, in terms of absolute muscular power, we see that the sex-related differences are similar for those of muscular strength when we're talking about absolute terms. And if we look at some specific measures of muscular power, such as maximal vertical jump and standing long jump scores, they're typically lower in women, but very similar when we express the values relative to fat-free mass. Now, despite these sex-related differences, men and women respond to resistance exercise from their pre-training levels in similar ways. In fact, studies have shown that women can increase their strength at the same rate as men or even faster. However, the value of resistance exercise for women extends far beyond an increase in muscular strength and includes favorable changes in other important measures of health and fitness, including bone mass. Now, studies have shown that muscle hypertrophy is possible in women who regularly participate in high volume or high intensity resistance training programs, even though these gains may be less than in those in males. And studies have shown that relative or percent increases are about the same or even greater in women, and relative short-term, at least up to 16 weeks in duration, changes or increases in muscle hypertrophy are similar between the sexes. So looking at one initial study published back in 1994, looking at basically relative gains in muscular strength. In this case, relative means that the increases in one repetition maximum were made relative to that individual's fat-free mass. But we see that in both men as well as in women, we see substantial increases in relative muscular strength. This is for the leg press on top, the leg extension, and then the back squat here over the course of 9 weeks in this specific study. Now, this 1988 study from Cureton et al. Looked at muscle hypertrophy. They evaluated upper arm and thigh muscle cross-sectional area as a measure of muscle growth. Here we see the ME is the male experimental group, so those that perform resistance training. The FE is the female experimental group, so the women that perform resistance training, and these are the control subjects that did not perform resistance training. But what we see here in or at least in the upper arm, we see an increase in upper arm muscle cross-sectional area in both the men as well as the women in response to resistance training. We see an increase here in the thigh muscle cross-sectional area as well, but this increase did not reach statistical significance.